The hot sun beat down mercilessly on the rugged plains, the kind of heat that makes the horizon shimmer like liquid gold. Dust rose with each hoofbeat as the group of cowboys rode slowly along the trail, scanning the vast emptiness for any sign of movement. They had been out since dawn, herding cattle through the unforgiving landscape, when one of them squinted against the sunlight and froze. There, limping and staggering through the dry grass, was a woman, her figure unmistakable against the endless brown of the prairie. She moved with a fragile determination, each step a battle, her dress torn and dusty, but it was the sight of the blood seeping through the fabric over her chest that made the men stiffen in shock. A bullet wound, and yet she walked, refusing to fall, refusing to surrender. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Cowboys are not strangers to violence, nor to women in trouble, but there was something different about this moment. Some of them tightened their reins and whispered amongst themselves, debating whether to intervene. "She's probably going to be gone by the time we get close," muttered one, eyes narrowing at the distance. Another nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. Fear and caution wrestled with instinct. They had seen death before, but seeing it approach in the shape of a living woman, stubbornly defying it, brought a chill none could shake. Yet one cowboy, taller than the rest, with a calm steadiness in his eyes, did not hesitate. He felt something stir inside him, a mix of compassion, duty, and a stubborn refusal to let her die alone in the scorching heat. Without a word, he spurred his horse forward, cutting through the dust, his heart pounding as he closed the gap between them. The other men watched, some shaking their heads, some turning away, unwilling or afraid to help. But he would not turn away, not this time. As he reached her, the woman tried to keep walking, but her knees buckled under the weight of the injury, and she stumbled forward onto the dry earth. Pain etched into every line of her face, yet in her eyes burned the fierce light of someone who refused to give in. You have to help me," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying the urgency of survival. Without hesitation, he dismounted, dropped to his knees, and gently lifted her into his arms. Her head rested against his shoulder, her shallow breaths trembling with every movement. The weight of her body was nothing compared to the weight of responsibility he felt, the gravity of knowing that a single choice had made the difference between life and death. The sun seemed to grow hotter with each step he took toward the river that ran through the valley, the only water source for miles. Dust clung to sweat-slicked skin as he moved with steady determination, keeping her as comfortable as he could while ignoring the growing ache in his arms. Her hand found his, gripping it weakly, and he could feel the fragile thread of her heartbeat against his chest. She murmured faint words, broken and desperate, asking who he was, what had happened. He whispered reassurances, promises that she would be all right, though the truth was that every step brought uncertainty. But his resolve never wavered. He refused to let her fall. As they neared the riverbank, the sound of running water brought a small, fragile smile to her lips. Her eyes, clouded with pain and fear, brightened slightly at the promise of relief. Gently he knelt and lowered her to the ground, easing her so that her head rested near the flowing stream. He cupped water in his hands and brought it to her lips, coaxing her to drink, careful with every movement. The cool liquid seemed to bring a spark of life back into her weary body, her breathing easing slightly as hope began to take root. The other cowboys had stopped at a distance, unsure what to do, watching as this one man risked everything for a stranger. Some shifted uncomfortably, their pride and fear wrestling inside them, while others felt a flicker of shame at their inaction. One by one they realized the truth. Courage is not always about facing a gun or a storm. Sometimes it is about choosing to care when the easier path is to turn away. Hours passed, the sun dipping low toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains. The cowboy stayed with her, tending to her wound as best he could with the meager supplies he had. He pressed cloth to the bleeding wound, applied water to cool the heat of fever, and whispered words of encouragement. He shared stories of the prairie, of the cattle, of the long trails they had ridden, trying to distract her from the pain and fear. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to relax, her body trusting him in a way it hadn't trusted anyone for a long time. By nightfall, the other cowboys finally approached, bringing blankets and extra water, realizing that their comrade's courage had saved a life that none of them had dared to protect. The woman's eyes, once clouded with pain, now shimmered with gratitude and a quiet wonder at the kindness shown to her. She whispered her thanks, her voice breaking as emotion overcame her. The cowboy simply nodded, brushing dust from her hair, saying only, "You're safe now. That's all that matters." As they set up a small camp by the river, tending to the wound through the night, the woman's breathing grew steadier. Every so often, she would look up at him with an expression that spoke of more than gratitude. There was awe, relief, and a deep human recognition of bravery. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on their faces. But the warmth of human compassion was stronger, brighter than any flame. By morning, the first light of dawn stretched across the prairie like a promise. She was still weak but alive, her spirit rekindled by the man who had refused to leave her behind. The cowboys prepared to ride again, this time with her safely mounted on a wagon, supported and protected. She turned to the cowboy who had carried her, her eyes shining with tears. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. He shrugged, a small, humble smile on his lips. "You don't have to. Just live." "That's thanks enough." The group rode out together, leaving the river behind, but the story of that day, of courage, compassion, and humanity, would linger in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. It became a story whispered across campfires, a reminder that bravery is not always loud and flashy. It is sometimes quiet, steady, and deeply human. And to everyone watching this story unfold, remember this: heroism is within all of us. You may not ride through the prairie or lift someone from the brink of death, but every act of kindness, every decision to help rather than ignore, can change the course of a life. Courage is contagious and compassion is powerful. If this story inspired you, if it made your heart beat a little faster or your hope grow a little stronger, subscribe to the channel. Join a community that celebrates courage, humanity, and stories that touch the soul. Share this story, carry its message forward, and be the reason someone believes in goodness today. Life is fragile, but the human spirit is stronger. And just like the cowboy who stopped when others rode past, you too can make a difference. Never underestimate the power of one person's choice, one act of bravery, or one gesture of care. Subscribe, stay with us, and let's discover together the stories that remind us what it truly means to be alive.